Join Alex, Shauna, and Grace, that's me, as we hit the road to discover who we are in light of who God is. Along the way, we'll be joined by friends, authors, and community leaders to discuss the intersection of faith and action and have a ton of fun while doing it. So grab a coffee, jump in the car with us, and let's roll.
Hey y'all, we are so excited about this week's guest. This week in the car, we have Ka'eo Yoshikawa, not only a beloved friend of ours, but a youth pastor here in the Valley, a photographer, writer, and truly a champion of all people. When I tell you he is everyone's biggest cheerleader, y'all, I mean it. This week, we chat with Ka'eo about suffering, pain, and friendship, and how God meets us in all of it. This conversation is so raw, so rich, and full of grace and love. If you're walking through a valley or coming alongside someone who is, this one's for you. Grab your coffee and let's roll. It is a beautiful rainy day in Fresno, California. It's a Friday, and we're excited to be here. So welcome to Carpool Theology.
I'm Grace.
I'm Alex.
And I'm Shauna.
We are so happy to be here. The clouds would say they aren't. They look a little sad today. It's really rainy.
Yeah.
It is rainy.
It rained on the parade.
But you know what's only makes it rainy better? It's a hot cup of joe.
Yes, we are in line to get ourselves a cup of coffee. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Alex, you shared with us this morning your Nespresso order. And I think you should share it with the people. You're an order, like you go through a drive-through for it. Okay. What you make at home.
Do we have Nespresso people in this car?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, so get ready.
I feel like you might want to write this down.
Never, you're not in the car.
Ka'eo is not here.
Pay no attention to the man in the passenger seat.
Sorry.
Okay, dude, Nespresso, espresso pods.
Nespresso,
so I
espresso.
like the Dolce, like double espresso one.
Influence us, please, Queen.
Yeah.
Okay, in a stainless steel shaker, a little scoopy of brown sugar, a little of cinnamon, over ice, shaker up, okay, and then a little dash of the infamous Trader Joe's brown sugar oat milk creamer. I actually have 16 little. It comes in a little can.
The magnum opus of Trader Joe's products.
It's literally the best thing that's ever come to life.
Yeah.
I have so many of them because I'm scared they're gonna run out.
How many have you bought at once, Alex?
At least 10.
She's unwell, people. Please check in on
In
Alex.
my outside fridge, I have at least 10 on hand all the time. And if it gets lower, I have to go restock. I get very nervous.
Okay, so what that communicates to me is that if Alex gives you some of her special oat meat creamer, you are very dear to her.
Also, sometimes I just help myself to her oat milk creamer when I'm there, and I know in my heart, I'm like, she's fine, she's got enough.
You've got all your fingers, though. She hasn't broken one of them.
No.
Like, don't ding my creamer.
No.
Here we go.
Tail, you're in
it. Cheers. Woo! Carpool Theology. Energy. Dink, dink.
Love it.
Ting.
Yep. So as I was getting ready, I was like, I need something to like pump me up. We have carpool theology, like recording this morning. And like, Alexa, we play that Whitney Houston. And Whitney just connected to my soul. Rest in peace. And I was thinking, I was confronted with a lament for the generation that my kids are growing up in. 13 and 16. They might not have a single Celine Dion or Whitney Houston.
I mean, Adele?
Yeah.
Adele is right there, okay? She is. But that's not what my kids are listening to.
That's true.
That's what I am listening to.
That is true.
To escape from them.
Yes.
And their, Cardi B's and whatever else, Lady Gaga. Which I'm not trying to hate on those women either. Like, they have their place in our culture. But I was just like, we don't have a lot of powerhouse pop female singers. Am I wrong in that?
I mean, I think that's definitely
They would
objective.
disagree.
However, I would agree with you that we don't have some whole good music these days. That is female driven.
Yeah.
That's not Christian. We're gonna be mainstream, But Yeah.
Like I was like
listening
third,
to,
like the
graders.
song from The Bodyguard, and like I Will Always Love You, her remix of Dolly Parton, and I'm like, fire.
Yeah. I think the kids would say they've got Selena Gomez. You know, speaking of Selena Gomez,
Queen, love her.
she is in a bit of somewhat of a feud, or TikTok has decided she's in a feud
That's
with
probably
Hailey
why.
Bieber.
Yep.
With Hailey Bieber?
Yes, to the point,
I am so
She's always trying to bring us down.
where I went to a pokey place the other day, and the tip jars were tip for Selena Gomez or tip for Hailey Bieber.
What's
everywhere.
Should I tell the people what's going on?
What's the debate?
Okay. So the beef is that Selena Gomez obviously has a multi-million-dollar makeup company called Rare Beauty. She posted a video and she's doing her eyebrows, and her eyebrows, like, she's doing them and they're like obviously laminated or whatever. The next thing you know, Kylie Jenner posts a video and like a zoom up of her eyebrows. And Kylie Jenner, for the people who don't know, is best friends with Hailey Bieber. So she posts a video and she's like, look at my eyebrows, you guys. Like, she's making fun of her. And then very quickly, Hailey Bieber posts a zoom in of her eyebrows and then deletes it.
Ew.
Bad, mean girl energy. Mean girl energy
That
is
some
out
petty
here
stuff.
on these TikTok streets. So the people were writing for Selena, like,
what the
and
heck?
lots of people are doing deep dives on the interactions and relationship of Selena Gomez and Hailey. There's conspiracy theories going on that Hailey Bieber has been copying Selena Gomez all these years. They have the same very small G tattoo on their neck behind their ear, which Selena Gomez got first and then Hailey Bieber got. It's very strange. I'm just saying, I'm not saying I have a side, and I'm not saying who I tipped, but I'm just saying that this is happening on the internet.
Well, you know what? We are in the car today with a super special friend, and near and dear to all of our hearts.
It's true.
Somebody that we get the absolute honor and pleasure to do ministry with, and we have been able to learn under for myself, a couple years. Shawnee, you probably known him the longest. But yeah, our friend,
Me.
our bud, our friend Ka'eo.
Yes.
I will butcher your last name.
Yeah, it's okay. So my name is Ka'eo, and my last name is Yoshikawa. If you say Ka'eo, it means cornucopia, like stuff with food in Hawaiian. So you don't necessarily, you'll be calling me fat if you say Ka'eo. Yeah. So we definitely accent the Ka'eo.
Did I say it right?
As if you're doing like uh-oh, like uh-oh.
Ka'eo.
Yeah, Ka'eo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about you. Like, what's happening in your life?
Yeah, okay. So, like you guys said, I work for the Well. I work for a church here in Fresno, work in the high school ministry. What's going on with my days? Well, currently it is the CrossFit Open. It's a national competition, worldwide competition for CrossFit. And the reason why it's big in my house is because my wife is a CrossFitter and a coach for CrossFit. And so she made it into the quarterfinals.
Of course she go, Kathy.
She is advancing. That means she was in the top 10% for, I think, our region or our, like,
Wow. How big is the region?
I think it's the all of the United States, or it's simply just the West Division. Can't remember specifically, but she's the top 10% female in that space.
Absolutely incredible.
So,
And if you haven't met Kathy, she's like the most understated person. She's like has this deep calm.
yeah,
Deep calm.
deep calm.
And she's
That's actually a very beautiful way to put
yes.
it. Deep calm.
Deep calm. And apparently is a CrossFit
She's a beast. She's savage.
beast. I have heard that to be trained by Cassie is to, like, no goodness. She is an amazing trainer. And I need to get under her.
That's really good. Well, because there's always like a bad rep around CrossFit, and when she like coaches them, she does like a lot of like the fundamentals, like the like, hey, here's how you not hurt yourself, so you can be like the rest of the world. And a lot of people come back and be like, wow, I just really felt like I had almost like all my fears kind of went away. It was like very patient. Went into like the normal, like when you think of the gym, like people just yelling at you kind of thing. It's not that. So, and also like the idea that Cassie's just like, oh yeah, you're very strong, but you're not like, I'm trying to brag to the world that I am yoked. You know, that whole like that energy, talking about.
Yeah. Never going in there and changing the game.
Yep. So
She does not have that energy.
she does.
But then it's like it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, like Cassie, like and then you like actually looking at her shoulders, and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah. It's pretty rich.
Yeah, she's through this. Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't make Cassie angry in our house. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your story, and just your background, and a little bit of your journey, like how you got even here to a place of doing ministry, what your life has been like, and why students specifically too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. It's a long story short, but I don't even know if it's possible to make this short story long or this long story short. But either way, I'm not originally from Fresno. I'm actually originally from Hawaii, so I was born and raised there, hence the name. And I lived there until about 13 or so. And then my parents were divorced, and so my dad was currently living in Oakland, California. And then he was working for a company called Kitty Hawk, which is like an airplane company, I suppose. And FedEx like bought them out or something. And so my dad transitioned to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And then when I was 13, there was
That's a big shift.
Yeah, already, right? California to Oklahoma for my dad. Huge. And then in Hawaii, it was like not a very fun space for me to live. It's already a broken home, and then my stepfather was like pretty abusive, and experienced like some neglect. And so what happened was I got taken to foster care, or foster home, was there for a little bit, got back, and then my parents disowned me at that point, and we had a judge ruling to like change custody. So I ended up getting on a plane and moving to Oklahoma to live with my dad. And like the important part of the story is the last time I saw my dad, I was 4. So my biological.
Were you at that time?
At that time, I was 13. Yeah, so we moved over.
That's a tender age.
So I moved to Oklahoma. That's how I got there. A lot of people were like, "Why you moved from Hawaii to Oklahoma?" And it's like, that story's kind of heavy. So I just say like, oh yeah, like my parents are divorced, and that's how we do split custody when you live this far away. But that's how I got there. Went to high school. I wanted to be a meteorologist, like to do the weather, like to forecast the weather. Going from Hawaii to Oklahoma, it's like, wow, I didn't know the weather could change so quickly. And I was very fascinated by that. And after finding the Lord and just like being like, hey Lord, like I really believe in who you are, what you say you are, and essentially declaring that Jesus is my Lord in that moment, I almost had more of an awe of God through the weather, being like, wow, like the intricacies that you've created for science, like for these things to happen is beautiful. And so that's kind of where I was like, well, I'm going to stay here, go to the University of Oklahoma, because the National Weather Center is located there. So all the weather that you receive actually comes from the National Weather Center, and your local meteorologist kind of just reread the report.
From in Oklahoma?
Yeah, yes.
Wow.
It's pretty fascinating.
Today.
So, and then after that, I was really heavily involved in the church, and I started to, we went on an exposure trip / mission trip to Egypt, because the church I was at, what's the word? The senior pastor is a converted Muslim, and so he had a really big heart for Egypt. And so it was there, we got to just see this is also post 9/11. So there was already a lot of stereotypes for the Arab world. And so going there was really helpful to recognize that Jesus died for these people too.
Yes.
And so I talked to my youth pastor, being like, hey, I feel like God wants me to be an interpreter for the gospel or something. And my youth pastor was like, well, it's not really a matter of if, it's just a matter of yes. Are you going to say yes to that? So changed my major, went to the University of Oklahoma to be a interpreter. So my undergrad's in Arabic, which people are like, what?
We did not.
Yeah. Wait, I thought it was seminary stuff. And it's no. I interpreted for 2 nonprofits in 2013, and was able just to really just help move the gospel with places that you really can't talk about Jesus in the 1040 window. And so that was pretty cool. Obviously there's not really much rest and peace in the Middle East, and so we were always praying for. So then what happened was the company I was working with, their grant fell through because they moved to the Ivory Coast instead. And then that's how I got plugged into the church. My college pastor was like, hey, help start up this intern program with us. we feel like your giftings are with like students. And I was like, I don't know. I never really wanted to work for the church. I wanted to I like vocational ministry. I wanted to like be a stateside missionary and go abroad and stuff like that. But I didn't really see myself being a part of like working for the institution or like the local church itself. And I was like, okay, well, I don't really know where to go. And so I'm going to just kind of trust the Lord here. And then started a fifth and sixth grade ministry in the church I was in Oklahoma. And then over time, I just kind of realized, wow, like a lot of my story and a lot of the way I'm wired actually helps me minister to students in a way that I didn't realize it could. And it kind of granted purpose for a lot of things that I thought were like unredeemable, if that's a word. And so that was really cool. And then I kind of just like progressively stayed there. So I kind of went from preteen to teens to over all of them. And then I got married and my wife was like, yo, listen, we'd love to move to the West Coast. And I said, okay.
They're really like, you know, have a meeting. We really like this. I know what you want.
And I was like, okay. And then it just kind of made sense too, because like all my family's in Hawaii. And at that time, some of her family was in Colorado and Oklahoma. And so splitting the difference made sense. And so we kind of prayed through it a lot and was like, all right, let's just go somewhere on the West Coast. Didn't matter where. We just trusted the Lord. And what we loved about the well was the way they were communicating about the next gym was exactly how my heart was, because I feel like a lot of times we're like, oh, like if only they were older, then we'll minister to students. And it's like, I think we missed the point, and we can't wait for them to get older. Or like when they have big problems, that's when they can't, or when they can fully understand all the theology of atonements, then maybe we can like start talking to them about Jesus or anything like that. And so
Because adults understand.
yeah, I was like, the problems are the same, they're just smaller bodies. So anyway, so that's why I was like, well, I really want to be a part of this church, and that's how we got moved out here. So that's like that in like a nutshell.
I'm so glad that you got out here.
Yeah, we're stoked. We love it here.
Tell us a little bit about what that was like for you to come to the Lord, and maybe crack that open for us a little bit. You know, it sounds like it's kind of an intense, sad journey up until that point. So yeah, give us a little like before and during and after.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the story just kind of matches the weather, so I think it's like on point. It's a vibe.
We did say, we were like, we loved a rainy day, like carpool theology day, and then just to have you in the car, just like matches your like your soul, almost not like rainy.
Yeah,
like,
I know, but this
like
feel.
yeah, like and then your photography, like your, you know, you are just, I don't know, why do I tie like rain with like emotions and like feelings?
Yeah.
Because it's rain.
Yeah.
And I think
And
like,
coffee.
not in like a negative connotation, but just yeah. So we were like, what a great day to have Ka'eo.
It's pretty rare.
You are a sunshine person though, so don't take that way.
Oh no, I didn't take that way. I think the weather gives us permission to feel, and so that's what I like try to allow people to do.
Yeah,
But
that's cool.
anyways,
Sorry.
no, I appreciate that affirmation. Okay, so the story. Okay, so obviously it's a broken home coming to Oklahoma, and so I didn't really know my dad, and I got invited to church. We knew there was a God in Hawaii, but Jesus is one of the many gods that exist, just because of like Hawaiian culture and tradition. And so like I didn't even think we even went to like mass at one point for like Christmas, and I was just like, oh yeah, like Jesus is up there with Pele, like he's like, that's like his sister, and Pele's like the goddess of all the volcanoes in Hawaii. It's like, that's just what was in my mind. So then moving to Oklahoma, it's in like the Bible Belt, you know, like it's more like everyone goes to church, whether or not you believe. It's very culturistic in that way.
Yeah.
And so anyways, so one of my friends was like, hey, we're doing a volleyball tournament. You're from Hawaii. I feel like you'd love that. And I was like,
We love a good stereotype.
oh my gosh. But I would really like to play volleyball. And at that time, they didn't have boys volleyball in Oklahoma. They only had girls. And so I went to the church, and then that night, the youth pastor was speaking on Psalm 139 and how like God knows like intimately who we are, and there's no place we could go to escape that. And I felt like in that moment, I was just like, well, I would rather be a part of that family than the family that I'm currently in, which is non-existent. And my dad he worked he was an airplane mechanic, like I said, and so he worked 3:30 p.m. until midnight.
Wow.
And so and he couldn't shift his schedule obviously because of a seniority. And so I remember I would get home, my dad be gone. I go to bed, my dad'd still be gone. I wake up, my dad be sleeping, and I go to school. So it was very much I felt very alone.
Yeah.
And I think we can always teenagers be yeah, I remember what it feels like to be alone. I always felt alone everywhere. And then people only want to be your friend because you're a novelty. You're oh, you're from Hawaii. You're the only kid from Hawaii. Wow. And so I dealt with a lot of fake relationships. There was nothing that was very tangible. There was nothing that was very safe. And so to hear that there was someone who created the heavens and the earth, but was very mindful of the intimate and intricate and tiny details of who I am, I almost was just I have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
please Jesus, be the one,
Yeah.
and that's how in that moment of desperation, I was yes, Lord, please, let me be a part of your family. And over time I learned that being a part of your family is a piece of it, but ultimately I have to understand also just the gravity of my sin and even how we got separated in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily the whole where am I gonna go when I die that led me to salvation with the Lord. It was more his actual character, that he loves us so much, and that's what I was desperately seeking for, that led me to Christ. And then over time just being sanctified, learning that oh yeah, my sin also separates me from him, but because of the good news of Jesus, I get to even be part of that family, and so, and having to deal with abandonment issues a lot. It's the fact I hang on to a lot of scripture that says that he will never leave us or forsake us, or even in Psalm 139 where it's wherever I go he will be there. Even in the moments when I feel running away, Christ is running with me, so it's or he's already there. It's oh, I knew you'd be here. It's oh, that's sweet. Those things. And so I think that answers the question.
Yeah. It makes me wonder too, I see you, we work at the same place and we run into each other, in the coffee shops and in and around our work environment. But I see you mentoring a lot and meeting with guys, whether they're on your leadership team or whether they are students that you just connected with for one reason or another. How was that evident in your walk and in your development? Obviously before you knew you were going to be a youth pastor. But even how does that encourage, and how did that sort of put a salve on those abandonment wounds?
Yeah, I have a lot of fear of man, and also just this idea that men aren't safe, and I think, but still that longing of I would I still need that, we're wired to have those things, I think. And I learned a lot, especially in high school and in college, of men taking time to almost battle the lies that I have in my own head, as far as because I didn't really have a male figure, that I'm not man enough, or oh, I'm very sensitive, so that goes against counterculture or what society says that a man should be. Or I don't even know how to process these things out loud because I'm afraid if I say these things, then the whole world crumbles. I'm admitting that this is real. And I just remember a lot of men who would take time of their day, who would sit and just let me listen, or would just sit and listen and process, and then look at me and just kind of say I don't see you any differently, or who told you those things, I admire this of you, or can I speak this of you, kind of thing. And me recognizing that sometimes that's all I actually needed was someone to say I see you, and just that value of that. And then when I sit across of other high school students, or even just anyone that I kind of work with, the longing is the same. I'm insecure about X, Y, and Z, and I have forgotten the truth at some point. Help me remind me what I've forgotten.
Yeah.
And just you get to sit there and kind of hold space for people, and then kind of remind them of the truth that you are already loved. The performance aspect of your life, I understand that is such an exhausting thing to keep running. What would it look like for you if you were living out the fact that Jesus already loves you? You know? And just reminding them of that, and not recognizing that I don't know. I think for a lot Men, it's like I have a lot of big feelings. I don't know how to process that, don't know how to say it. And if I do say it, now I'm like, I'm weird, or I'm like, cast it out. And I recognize that, like, yeah, I think the Lord wired feelings for a reason. And somehow society said we can't have those, at least for men anyway. It's like socially acceptable for women to have them, but it's not socially acceptable for men to have them.
Yeah.
And so like to create safeness is for like guys to be like, oh yeah, like I feel this way, I probably shouldn't feel that way. And it's like, well, that's not true. Like that's an indicator of like the Holy Spirit's trying to get hold of your attention.
Yeah.
And so how do we process that and filter that and then look at the truth? And so anyways, I don't really know if that really answers that question, but
I just love that you
that's
have
what
the
happens.
platform you do and that passion and experience that you have. That's such a gift.
Yeah, and I was just talking to someone about this the other day. Gosh, I wish I could remember. I feel like it was a conversation I was having with a parent.
Tell why you would have a conversation with a parent.
What?
Tell the people why you would have a conversation with a parent.
Oh, I serve in WSM.
That's one of my words.
Yeah, so, I hang out with him once or twice a week. But I want to say we were talking about this concept of men and their feelings. And I was just able to, and I want to share this with you, I was able to share with them because the person was speaking like negatively of the church and how they, I can't recall if it was our church just in it or just the church in general, and how they don't equip men well enough to do what you're talking about, right? And I was like, you're right. Oh, I don't know, it's coming back to me. It was about just this like void of real discipleship in different church settings. How there's a lot of emphasis on like women's discipleship and women's studies and women's equipping, I think, but there's just not a ton for men. And I think that provides a gap in marriage now, especially when they're starting to get poured into, equipped, have community, and it's being flourished, but then there's not that same space for men. And I told her, I said, look, I agree. But I am so excited and encouraged by what the Well does in our next gen, because from our stage, we have people like Ka'eo, we have people like Jordan, we have people like Michael, who stand there and they, week after week, tell these boys that it's okay to have feelings, that it is okay to be strong. You're strong when you express your feelings and emotions. It is okay to enter these things that are already starting to like put those seeds in their mind, so that later on down the road, effectively, when they might not have resources to like, or outlets to cultivate that, they already have that foundation. And so I'm really encouraged that my son one day will be able to enter into that space, just with that truth, because it's just not the case necessarily. Well, it wasn't the case with our husbands and our dads and our grandfathers, because that culture is starting to flourish a little bit more now with our next gen. And it's just so encouraging. And so I just had to take a second to like, I don't think I've heard you like speak about that. Like intimately, not from stage or not from like leader meetings or whatnot, but.
Well, and I think what we're experiencing too is a pendulum shift. You spoke a little bit about like, there's all these things for women. And that's because like for a long time there was nothing for women, right? In the evangelical church. So when we're like, I think the shift that there was like a deep swing in the early 2000s of like men are the leaders, like you hold it down, like this is how you be a man. And so I think what we're experiencing and what like Ka'eo you're speaking of too is like we have to shift the pendulum from that conversation to yes, you are called to lead. You are called to lead in love, and there's a way to do it that honors God and honors the people around you, that you don't have to assert yourself in a way that's hurtful or dismissive or abusive. I don't know if you had a thought on that, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. I think that's definitely what's currently happening.
Yeah.
And also, too, I also agree that there is that type of void, Alex, or it's like, oftentimes we'll find that, like, women are probably more leaders spiritually than they are in the home, and that's like women seek after those resources, and then because of societal standards and like stereotypes, men are like, I cannot ask for help or equipment or anything like that because I should already know these things.
Oh, the should.
And and it's in ways in their whether they're willing to like vocalize that or not, weakness.
Like
or
inability to provide,
Right.
failing as a husband or a provider or whatever. He's just
false.
It's that shame that just keeps you trapped.
Yeah.
And everybody else is killing it in this area. And if I admit that I'm struggling, what does that say about me?
Yeah.
If they only, it's the classic, if they only knew.
Yeah. ... Yeah, it's that and pride. So like a lot of times I sit across from men and it's really just pride. I don't want to look like, you know, and with the shame as well. Yeah, I think it's even underlying in that as well. And so it's like almost like walking them through that, being like, you know, that's actually, no one has it figured out. You know, and we actually need each other more than you actually think. Which is why I think, I mean, you can disagree, it's a hot take for me, which is why I think when like male friendships tend to be more like, wow, that's actually very much like Jonathan and David, or that's very much Proverbs 27:17, where it's iron sharpens iron. A lot of people are like, wow, that's so like, that's cool, because it doesn't happen very often. And what happens if like no one really batted an eye on that? Like, oh yeah, that's normal. That's what it to look like. And so like that's what we're championing with our students. We're like, hey,
It's so vital. I mean that they need it, and it's just such. We could talk all day about this. Sure.
Yeah, speaking. It takes a lot to face our pasts, to look them in the eye and like do a deep dive on them and analyze that. What encouragement do you have for those who are struggling to look in the rearview mirror? And
I chuckled a second because it's like the illustration I think is like, let's look in the rearview mirror. There's a reason why we don't look there very often or very long. You know, we're always looking forward. And even eye contact back here when you're looking at passengers in the back, it's more like quickly. It's not, and we don't hold gazes, you know. And so I think because it's very difficult. We're afraid that if we look back too long, like the things that we like have quote unquote healed from end up taking us back captive. And we're afraid of staying in that place. It's like the whole thing, right? Sometimes we don't even want to feel like negative feelings because we're afraid that we can't get ourselves out of them.
And no one wants to be a victim.
No one wants to be a victim. I just would process that as past week where it's like, I'm done being needy. Like I'm done having bad days, you know? And then my friend being like, well, that's just you being human. I don't, like, humans can have bad days and they can be plural, you know? And I was like, okay, you're not wrong. But for me, as far as like, it's been a journey for me. I think I've taken the last 3 years. 2020 was a very catalytic moment for me. There were a lot of big events that happened that were very triggering for me that I thought, oh, I need help. And so I like asked my wife, but I mainly essentially said, hey, this is what I'm doing. Wasn't necessarily like, hey, can I get permission, or do you think this is a good idea? I just knew in my heart that like this was a good idea for me and for us, and for all. And so I just started going to therapy in 2020, and realized that I didn't go to therapy when I moved. Like after all the like abuse, after all that transition and change, I didn't go. No one took care of the soul or the heart. It was just a lot of like physical needs. And so I had a lot of things that like I have found ways to cope in that I just thought was how I was supposed to live my life, or how I was already wired, and realizing that a lot of things were like unhealthy. And so that's been really difficult. I wouldn't say it's very easy, and it's actually not fun, but to be in a safe environment where it's like the person's for you, it's like a Christian counseling center, and so like the people are very much like, we are driven by the gospel and the truth of it, but also like walk through like, hey, like almost hearing the things that you wish or you didn't know you could hear, like, hey, like that was unfair. That should not have happened. That was not God's design. My favorite phrase is, how could you not? How could you not do the things that you have done, or how could you not have like coped the way you did, knowing that all of things have happened? It almost makes you feel understood. And then processing like, okay, like my therapist says like, yeah, for the longest time, like picture yourself as a mountain, the rain has fallen and it has created a rut of this is where the water always goes. And now you're learning that that's actually wasn't the best place for the water to go. And you're having to redig a trench and you're trying to fill up the old rut. And now, so that's why I said there's some days when you're dealing with like trauma or hurt or even your past of like, oh, like there are a lot of what ifs that I should haves in my life, or moments that I think are too scary to even like process or share. We've created like these little ruts in our lives where it's like this is how we cope with them, and they're not healthy. And so over time we're learning that like we shouldn't do that way, but we should go the other way. And there are days when there's a lot of rain that happens, it's gonna go back. So you shouldn't judge the fact that like your healing is taking too long, or like I went 5 steps back and back at where I started, because that's just you learning healthy coping things and trusting in the Lord.
It's such a beautiful picture. What would you say to someone who, because I've heard your story a couple of different times, and like abuse is much more common than we realize many times.
Yeah.
And comes in a lot of forms and a lot of different, it's a real spectrum. So what would you tell the person who has suffered some trauma, whether big T or little t, and it's just like, but God's enough. Processing with the Lord is enough. What would you tell that person to invite them into like maybe greater healing, or to just encourage them in that, like what God should be enough?
Yeah. Yes. I think I've clunged on the fact that God is enough, but there are days when God is enough because He's created like avenues where we can have like actual like practical healing in our present. So like the people who get to be Jesus incarnate to us.
Yeah.
And for us to be like God is enough, but then like throw away the community that God's provided is almost like God, the doctor saying this is what I'm prescribing for your healing. You're saying I don't want the medicine. And so like for me, I applaud you if listeners, if you're like, yeah, like I had a lot of trauma, but God is enough. Yes, I agree. You're not wrong. And actually I think God is more than enough. And I think that God has created like a lot of ways for us to process and to heal. And you trusting in the Lord as God is enough is also trusting in the fact that the things He's given you is also enough, which is i.e. community.
Yeah.
Recognizing that like sometimes there are days when the lies are way too loud. And you need other people to be like, I'm sitting right next to you so that way I can remind you of the truth that you have forgotten. Or when you kind of start spiraling, like God is enough, and He's enough by the fact that I'm now going to read God's word, or like I'm going to go ahead and like talk to my friend who like, I'm like, here are all the things that are going on in my mind. And they're like, okay, cool. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Well, so I hear you saying is this one thing is what was triggering it. Let's talk about that one thing. And it's like, oh wow, I thought it was a lot of things. It's really just one thing. I need help. I need someone else to be like, can I look at like your life as a whole or your day as a whole to help pinpoint that? And so I think that like, I don't know, I would just encourage the listener to be like, I think you're not wrong. God is enough, but I also think that God's provided other ways to help us because He loves us too much to leave us there.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes when we say God is enough, we're almost doing like this omission, like, yeah, God's enough.
Yeah.
And then I remind myself that, Moses stood before the Red Sea and told his people, hey, be still, the Lord will fight for you. And the Lord tells Moses, within the next verse, I have given you everything you need. Please just raise the staff. And so it's that tension of we can trust the Lord, but we also have something we need to do as well. And so...
Yes!
So I think that's what we should do. Alex is very passionate
I just had a friend text me this week that we say yes, like constantly in this pod, and I was like, I know, I like apologized, like I know, I'm so sorry, we're trying to work on it. She goes, no, she goes, make it a t-shirt. Like,
Yeah, we are a vocal group. But that's just some scriptural concepts.
So passionate about because I am a Jewer now, so I guess it doesn't. As we want like take note on, it doesn't come natural to everyone, right?
Yeah.
So I think the Lord's really been helping me in that lens of of helping me with my maybe expectations and or like solutions that I like just do it, like carry on and then move, like come on, like you gotta see help. We can't just sit and do this, or we can't expect change without movement. Like we gotta get going. But that's how He wired me. That's how He wired everyone else.
Yeah.
And also there's a lot of things that medically could hinder someone from that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the Lord doesn't provide ways, right? Like you're saying, like he's provided everything, there are ways to stuff. I agree. I can't second that enough. Something I was thinking that I would love for you to touch on, because we've been pretty like, we covered the journey of like the things you're paying to, all the positives. So like, can you outline a time in your life or through this process, either as a young guy, or even up personally, of course, probably some that you've struggled to cling to those promises, and or like how did that affect your what you walked through in life, and both the story the Lord's given you and the suffering that He has allowed you to endure, ultimately to bring to Him. But like, can you share with us if there has been a struggle, and that has impacted your faith since you accepted Christ as your Savior, to reconcile those sufferings and the continued shrapnel of essentially like your wounds. And you know, as a fellow person with similar pains, to, you know, each time a big life thing can happen, can really like strip away that layer of like, oh, that stings. That should be where family is in my life, and it's not there. And so, God, man, like this is revealing something in me right now again that I thought was healed. So, I don't know, can you share if you do struggle continuously, or was there a marked moment in your life where you were like, God, like, this is impacting maybe what I believe about you, or...
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think, if you just kind of stopped listening now, you would have missed the whole thing, because the idea is like, it sounds very pretty. And it's not. I think that's even like the misconception we believe when we like finally like, oh, I'm following after the Lord, and everything's like sweet and healed. Right. Like we're restored, we're redeemed, we're new believers. We're like the old is gone, the new is here, all this other stuff. Which we're not discounting those words; those are very true. But what I'm saying is like, just like a new seedling takes time to grow to an actual tree. It does take time for even us to even see the new things that God's doing in our lives. And it doesn't mean that like those things go away. There's like shadows. I call it flinching. And I don't know if I got it from my therapist, or I don't know, or it was just like an actual reaction for me. But like there are times when like I'm still flinching even though everything's safe. But for me, a lot of times where it struggles is it'll always be November for me every year. November is a marked time because that's when everything kind of went down. And that's also the beginning of the holidays, and that's when everyone asks you around Thanksgiving, oh, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? Are you going to see your family? And it's like, no. I am forced to, my reality is like forced to, or I'm forced to face the reality that like, I don't have the things that people so commonly take for granted. That like, you're going to go home and see like your mom or dad, or even if it's not great, you're going to go home. And I won't have that.
Right.
And so so Cassie strategically plans that we travel during those times. So I can say very like, unashamedly like, oh yeah, like me and my wife were gonna go here actually. And there are days or there are years when like we just can't travel during that time, and so I'm faced with having to say like, oh yeah, we're just gonna stay in town or whatever, and then I go home and cry. Because it's like family is not a fun word for me either, you know, for a lot of people too. Or like Christmas. Oh gosh, Christmas. People talk about family traditions, just they're not meaning to like put you on the spot, you know, but they're like, oh, like, what's your family tradition? Do you guys do this? And it's like, oh yeah, I don't have one. Or like, or they complain that they have like 23 different pajamas because every year their mom gets them a matching pajama set, and I'm like, wow, I wish my mom got me a matching set pajamas. You know, like just those things that like I'm not trying to be a victim, or I'm not trying to be like, woe is me, but I'm like, wow, like there was something that should have been that isn't. You know, and so every Thanksgiving and Christmas or holiday, birthdays are hard for me, because it's like you're expected that your family is gonna celebrate you, and then you're like, and then even when your friends show up, you're like, it's not it's just not the same, you know. So I think those are moments that every year they come back.
And I so appreciate your honesty in that, because I think so many times people could feel that and say like, oh, I'm not going to feel that. But for you to be so courageous, and I see it as a courageous act.
I appreciate it.
To say like, okay, this is coming. I'm going to not curl up into the fetal position and be hard during it.
Right.
I'm going to allow myself to feel it and allow it to pass. It doesn't get to be the boss of me. But I'm going to feel it. It's going to come. It's going to go. Maybe more slowly than you would have it. But like, that is such a courageous act. And I don't do this very much in the podcast, but I want you to know that like, that is not lost on people, even if you don't see that, because that is a character aspect of you that comes out in all sorts of ways. Like, that is like the saturation of like how Jesus has made you. And whenever you are around people, that sticks.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. So in those seasons, in those moments, that's when I often like I become like Habakkuk or Job, and I almost like, tell me why, Lord, that this is the burden, or this is the cross I must carry, or that's even part of the story. Could you not have rewritten it just a little bit different? And then the Lord is sweet, because He'll take all those things, and then He'll remind me that while I'm longing for things I do not have, He has provided things that are way better in the now. And so like my friends, they will like have their Thanksgiving dinners with their families, and the next day they come over and they bring all the leftovers, and we have like a Thanksgiving meal, and we just like do all the family things. Or Christmas, like my friends will go like to their Christmas things with their families, and they are the sweetest.
I love what you were saying about how your people rally around you when they know that you're having a tough time. So who are I want you to name them. Like, who are those people who continue to bring you back to yourself and remind you of who you are? And how do they do that for you? You mentioned Christmas and things.
Yeah. So I think it is very important for all my listeners out there who might be my friends. If I don't list your name, it doesn't mean that you don't have a place in my heart. But anyways, so I think first and foremost, like, we have to talk about my wife. I think it'd be dishonoring if I do not. But yeah, I think first, my wife's actually been through a lot of she's a very important friendship for me. And the next one will probably be Michael. Was like a very sweet and dear friend of mine. And then Sawyer. And I would also probably say, out of that, like some of my work friends like Brand and Jordan, Hillary, Eva, like they're very kind, especially because we do ministry together. So life in ministry, we like to pretend, most people have like the luxury that your job ends at 5 or 6. And you can kind of like have compartments of like your life and your work. For ministry, they tend to blend a lot, actually. And so sometimes it's really hard to do ministry without actually knowing how your other person is actually walking through life. And just as followers of Christ, we are encouraged to encourage one another and do a lot of the one another's for each other. And we play that out in the workspace as well. So that's why my work friends are really important in that as well. I would probably say for my wife, and so Cassie and Michael, they do a really good job of like noticing the smaller things, I think, for me. Like a lot of people will say like, how are you doing? I'm like, oh yeah, everything's fine, everything's good. And they'll know that if for some reason I say fine, I'm actually not fine, which I think is like most of society. But they're just a little bit more sensitive and like caring about, like, Ka'eo chooses his words actually very carefully when he talks about himself. And all he's asking is, do I have the permission to share or not? Because if you're not in that space, I don't want to go ahead and be like, here's everything, you know? And so they do a really good job. We have like phrases where in our household of like, hey, I'm holding space, is what they'll say. And that means they're like, hey, you have all my attention if you would like to go ahead and share something, but I'm also not going to push it if you don't feel like you want to share right now. We have another one where, like, when I have like really days where I really feel like I'm too needy or too much or whatever, Cassie and Michael do this really sweet thing where they either will like text me and be like, hey, what are you doing later? Or like, hey, like tonight I like push things, you know, And like for me, all that demonstrates is like, oh wow, like, you know, I need something, and like you're willing to like change your day. It's just like this idea of like, you're not just telling me that I'm worthy or have value, but you're also showing me that I'm worthy of value. And like for my story, it's like a lot of my stuff has just been like words, but then their actions haven't lined up. And so for my friends and even my wife to be like, I'm gonna push this so I can make sure I create space for you, or like, and then even in that moment, oh, this is really important. Even in that moment, I don't trust. Trust is a big thing for me.
Yeah.
So like, for instance, an example is like, my friends really are communicative about like their days, like what they have going on during that day. And then I remember I was having a really tough time, just like with a lot of things coming up. I had like a couple people yell at me at work, had triggered fear of man, felt very isolated, just a lot of things. And my friends literally were like, they all had different things, and they all had about an hour overlap. And they all showed up at that Cup of Joy and just sat there. And I was like, hey guys, like I know you're like super busy, so like don't worry about it, like we don't have to. And they're like, literally, Ka'eo, we're not busy. We're not busy for you.
Yeah.
And I was like, but you have that and you have that. Like I'm still trying to push them away, you know, like you have that and you have that, don't worry about me, like whatever, like go do that, you know, all this other stuff. And then I remember like Michael literally just like grabbing my leg. He goes, stop. A lot of people let you down today. We're not gonna let you down. I remember like I'm crying again.
I'm starting to cry. Oh, wow. Yeah. I think that is so powerful. I don't want to leave this bit of the conversation without an encouragement to our listeners and a challenge even. I heard this quote yesterday and it keeps coming back. It's a quote from Gandhi that said, it's better to have heart and no words than words with no heart. Yeah. And sometimes just holding space.
Yeah.
Not saying the right thing or trying to find the right verse or the right Gandhi quote, but to just hold space. It's so powerful.
Yeah, it is. And I'm like, what I'm holding here is just the sweetness and kindness of God to deliver this community and family to you. And I often feel that and get very emotional about the people that God has put in my life to remind me and to show me Him through the suffering that I could not ever comprehend. I'm like, why would you take this from me? And so it's just so sweet to be able to experience that unconditional love through people who technically, like, by societal standards aren't supposed to unconditionally love. They're not your family. Like, and so but they are, you know, and it's just God's kindness. And I remember like sitting with a person who was struggling through abandonment as well, and sharing with her just like this right here, like, you and I, this is God's kindness, like uniting us and bringing His people together, like through our struggles and our suffering. This is Him like redeeming that and giving us this relationship. And like, I'm so passionate about community because of that. Because like, I still ask those questions too. Like, why would God allow me to suffer for these things? Why couldn't I have an easier story? Like, why? But then it's like, because other people also are going to be at the hand of a hurt or fallen. Like, there's gonna be a lot, and He needs people to be able to relate to that in a different generation, and He needs to use His people to show them Him through healing someone else's healing down the line or whatnot. And it's just so beautiful. Community is just such a powerful tool that God uses to heal His people. And you and your commitment to that too, it's just, gosh, like, it's so inspiring. I'm like, I love seeing you talk about your friends, like, and how tender you are about them, and Cassie, and I think it's just a real gift that God is giving you amidst all the stuff He's essentially allowed to happen in your life.
I think the sweetest thing too is like, just kind of hearing what you're saying about like how like this shows the Lord. Sometimes it's like I would probably say like there are days when I'm like, oh, I wish I was even telling Cassie, I wish that like like in moments when like I feel like you're gonna hurt me, it's like I just like push away. Like I'll be in control of my own hurt at this point. And I remember telling her like, I'm so sorry that like on bad days this is what I want to do. It's just so unfair to you, you know? It's unfair to my friends, unfair to you. And I remember her going to me like, you can push me as much as you'd like, and I'm gonna keep coming back.
Stop.
And then I just remember the next day I'm reading the story of the prodigal son, where like the dad's just like, you can run away as far as you want to go. I'm still going to be here. And this idea, that's a big picture of that, like, you know, like the Lord's just like, look, I'm reminding you that, like, yes, so many times people ran away from you, but I didn't.
Yes. Yeah. That's when he's in my life.
Yeah.
Purpose. Yeah. I think that assumptions kill relationships. And so when we assume that, like, oh, they're good, or like, there's people closer to them, like, we're fine. We don't need to go that deep. Or like, they're like, I'm sure their wife or their spouse or whoever is taking care of that, you know. I don't need to step into that conversation. My goodness, like, all of us lose out. I hear you talking a lot about risk.
Yes.
It is risky
To be known.
to be vulnerable, and for your friend, like, it's risky for your friends because they know that you're gonna say you're gonna try to push.
Yeah.
And they have to be able to say what they just said. And that's a bravery, to be like, no, regardless, you know, because we're humans, we will hurt each other. And so every time we step into a new friendship or a long-term friendship, but maybe we've like kept it at a surface, to go that extra step deeper, yes, it's risky. Is it worth it? Yes. But it will feel uncomfortable because, yeah, you're right. Like, our society does not leave a lot of room and space for us to go deep with one another. Or even like you talking about like your friendship with Michael, like there could be some people listening to that and be like uncomfortable. Like, what? Like, why are they so close? You know, like, but I think that's it right there. Like, that's the sweetness, is that you've chosen to step into a very intentional friendship, and I'm sure over time it has evolved and changed and grown to now be like, that's your person. Like, we go deep, and like, he is gonna call me out, and we're gonna go to vulnerable and risky places that other friendships might feel uncomfortable with. And I say to that, like, what a sweet charge to the rest of us, that we would choose a person or a group of people and go, not only do I call you friend, I call you like my left and right arms, that you would know like what is going on in my life, my deepest struggles, my worst fears. And in everyday, I think sometimes we get caught up in like, oh, we're just gonna go to coffee and have a good time, you know, or we're gonna go shopping and it's gonna be fine. Being willing to take that extra step of like, hey, you good?
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
What do you need from me right now? Or like, hey, I heard you say this earlier. Could you explain that a little more?
That soul to soul connection
Yeah.
is really what that is.
Cool. Yeah, but my goodness, is it a journey? It's risky, but a worth it journey.
Yeah.
Because we know God better, right?
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah. It's really sweet.
We are in the deep.
I think we're good. Yeah.
I feel like we need to do a fueling your tank and wrap her up.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
So, how we wrap up every episode is we need to ask you 2 questions.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Was this on the email?
Please. Surprise. Okay. Number 1. What can you not leave your house without? This is a man's take, and I am quite curious.
Okay, well, I can't leave my house with my deodorant.
What?
So there's a deodorant in my backpack.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Are you a perspirer?
I'm not a perspirer, but I am aware that, like, I will probably get smelly at some point.
Gracious things and touches up.
Yeah, so I always have a deodorant, and then is this like the normal, like my keys, my wallet? Okay, so those obviously I need to get somewhere. My journal. So my journal has to come with me. So that one's probably different. So that one has to come with me.
Your great journal are ones we have not
Not had that.
And
Let's see.
my third one is. Did you say 3 things? I don't know.
Sure, 3 is fine.
All right, cool. Anyways, and then my last one is I like to make sure that I always have ibuprofen
I'm headache king.
for the days that I like end up not being able to drink coffee.
What?
Yeah,
So when I hear there's a caffeine addiction.
there is a caffeine.
Okay.
So like sometimes when I get too busy, I just like, oh shoot, I need to have coffee, and I need my ibuprofen.
About the first thing.
See, as a person in the next stage of life, I just assumed that was for like achy.
Oh, that was for coffee.
That can lead to headache. That was my thought process.
It was for the coffee. Like yesterday, I didn't get coffee until 7 p.m. and I was like, I took an ibuprofen at 2:30.
Yeah, that'd be a hard no.
So our next question is, what is fueling your tank right now? Do it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, go, baby.
We love a high one.
Thanks. Side mirrors are your friends. Wow. Okay. What's fueling my tank? I would have to say, number one. Well, I have 2. Number 1, like physical exercise is good for grounding me, so it actually is fueling my tank. I don't know if that's actually a good thing for everybody, but it is really good for me. And then the second thing is, no, it actually is like, I would like to say it's like meeting with people because that's like my job, it's supposed to be fueling for me. But I would probably say it's more like my writings. So like I've been like doing a lot of writing.
Fueling Eddie's tanks right now.
So it's actually very fueling for me because it's like oftentimes I'm just writing to myself, like what I wish I would say to myself in that space. And so it's been really like healing and like fueling my tank to like have another creative space for me to exist in.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool.
How do we find you? How do we find your writing? Yeah, your writings, your pictures,
Sure.
your travel.
Yeah, some too. They're all on Instagram, so just like at kaeo.y, and they're all there.
And we'll tag you.
My photos are there. They're mainly in existence because my wife's a travel blogger too, so like that's like my secondary job.
No, but where do you find her?
Hers is at Cassie. Oh my gosh, guys! Speaking of this, it's actually not even like related to the podcast, but like Cassie just launched her travel devotion.
Yes, I saw
And it's
that.
actually really cute and really sweet. My favorite line where she's like, "We always forget God in our PTO," and I was like, "Oh, that's real."
Like, honestly, it is. And I've been trying to dissect why.
Yeah.
Like, why when I go on vacation is this not a priority for my heart? Like, you'd think, is it because I'm like in this mindset that I'm on vacay, so I'm gonna have a discipline?
Yeah, I don't know.
What is it?
I mean, I feel like that's an episode all in itself.
She was talking to Cass.
Anyways, it's their call. But
Brilliant.
I just loved it. That was really cool. And nothing behind her. She was like, I just wanted to share that with you guys. But yes, Cassie's Compass, that's where she's at. Travel blogger, Christian travel blogger. It's a great thing. Super rad.
I mean, fun fact, I remember how I met you? When you were like starting to like get, you were like, I'm really trying to develop my portfolio.
Yeah. And I was like, can I just take some photos?
Yes, so you brought Cassie to the store, the first store, and you took photos,
That's
and they were so
right.
great. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. And then, like, literally, I think a month or 2 later, the Lord spoke to me like a thunderbolt in church. I was like, you will do youth ministry. And then I was like, what? They just had a baby, bro. And then I was like, I guess I should talk to somebody like
Yeah.
that. Okay,
I remember
and I
'cause-
just met you. I was like, wow.
I was talking about it, and then Bryn was like, listen, more people need to be like, Sheila was like, I want my kids to see that I'm serving. So we've taken that line when people were like, hey, like, I don't know, like, we have kids. And I was like, yeah, well, like,
We have Alex
do you want to see
and,
your kids, like, actually modeling the fact that you're serving? And they're like, wow, that's real. And then they serve.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Okay.
that.
Ka'eo!
Anyways, appreciate it.
Oh, this is such a joy.
Ka'eo, thank you for being in the car with us today.
Thanks for letting me carpool.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks for carpooling with us. Us being carpooligans. Did we ever
Did we
decide
land
on
on
that?
that? by
So
the
many
way?
people were team carpooligans.
Yeah. I mean,
I think it's pretty
It's
much a slam
pretty
dunk
funny.
for
carpooligans, we love you.
We love you.
We'll see you next time.
Yes, we
Bye.
will. Being here.
Bye.